United States Vice President Kamala Harris held back-to-back meetings with President Bongbong Marcos and Vice President Sara Duterte.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris visited Malacanang and paid a courtesy call to President Bongbong Marcos. VP Harris was welcomed with arrival honors. VP Harris also earlier announced that the U.S. and Philippines will have a civil nuclear cooperation agreement in relation to having zero-emission energy.
I believe that it is time also to re-examine our strategy towards building nuclear power plants in the Philippines. We will comply, of course, with the International Atomic Energy Agency regulations for nuclear power plants as they have been strengthened after Fukushima.
President Bongbong Marcos himself said it, tapping nuclear power is the way to go amid the looming energy crisis. But questions on safety and sustainability still remain. There's also the issue of funds with the country in a tight fiscal position. Are we ready to go nuclear? Can we afford it? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Finally, midweek. Welcome to this midweek edition of The Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao. Online, we have Ana Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star in Manila. And helping out with the conversations tonight, One News Business Editor Regina Lay. Ladies, magandang gabi and happy midweek.
Evening.
Good evening, Ed. Good evening, Amy.
Lumalapit na ang Biyernes. But before we get there, anong banner story ng Philippine Star today?
Di banner, pero first day of December, bukas aakit na naman ang presyo ng LPG.
Ouch!
Medyo malaki, mga more than 2 pesos per kilo, no? Pero pa yung VAT.
So that's 22 pesos for an 11 kilogram tank?
More than, no? Wala pa nga yung VAT, eh.
Okay. Okay. Panira ka naman ng nag-happy midweek na ako sa iyo eh.
Sige, neutral. Maglalabas ang BSP ng mga bills na for the first time bearing the signatures of President Marcos. Ayan, neutral na.
Speaking of the BSP, they also have inflation projections, di ba?
Yes.
Hanggang 8%.
8.2% daw. Baka umabot na 8.2%. So balik tayo sa taas presyo.
Kaya baka talagang taas ang presyo eh.
The first day of December pa naman, it's like the exact headline we don't want to hear.
Yeah.
May shortage, tataas yung prices ng ano yung latest? Itlog? Eggs?
Itlog. And they expect prices to go up further as we near Christmas dahil nga sa sangkaterbang leche plan at kung ano ginagawa ng mga Pilipino there. And then the other story that we're looking at, of course, that we can also talk about a little later is yung Sovereign Wealth Fund na gustong ipatayo ni Speaker Romualdez among other people.
Yes.
275 billion pesos being committed to that sovereign wealth fund. Hindi pa nga tapos sa committee level pero nangangako na yung mga GFIs ng pera. So that and more.
Well, of course, because the principal author kasi is very influential, right? Pero
there you go. Also the presidential son is.
I don't think they expect a lot of resistance when it comes to passing it. Problema lang with sovereign wealth funds is the execution. Yeah. It's like any investor. You can have you can make good investment deals. You can make bad investment deals. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, we have a lot to talk about. We will bring in our first guest after this break. So do please stay with us here in the Chiefs. We are, for years there have been plans about of adding nuclear power to the country's energy mix. Can the Marcos administration make it happen this time? We speak to Philippine Nuclear Research Institute Executive Director Dr. Carlo Arcilla. Dr. Arcilla, welcome back to the Chiefs. It's always good to have you on board.
Yeah, good evening po. Good evening po.
Evening.
Good evening, sir. Sir, anyway, we've been talking about nuclear power since last year. And then finally this year, mukhang umuusad na. Pero where exactly are we in the discussion right now?
Okay, first, qualify ko lang, kasi we are the regulators. The ones who are in charge of nuclear power is the Department of Energy. The Philippine Nuclear Research Institute will regulate if there will be a nuclear power. And we also will provide technical help. Mm-hmm. But the ultimate decision, for example, to go to nuclear will be a political decision.
Yes, sir.
And it will have to be through the DOE.
Yes, sir.
But having said that, there have been many developments, especially globally, on nuclear, with COP27, the concern for the climate is, paramount. And the world's largest source of carbon-free energy now is nuclear power. It provides 10% of the electricity of the whole world. In the US, it's 20%. Mm-hmm. So that's why, kasi ganito, the nuclear energy is 4 million times more concentrated than coal, gas, and several. So that's that's really the option that we have. And it's a
Dr. Arcilla, can I just jump in and have you explain to us what does it mean when it's more concentrated?
4 million times more concentrated.
4 million, exactly. What does it mean? Does it mean more electricity for less effort?
Oh yes. Okay, let me explain. In the atom, kasi the typical structure of the atom, remember you have the nucleus and then the electrons. All the other sources of energy, gasoline, coal, are dependent on the electrons exchange anyway. But the nucleus is the concentration of energy. So it's substantiated. That's why, to illustrate it, one small thimble is one of my buttons in my shirt of nuclear fuel will be equal to 1 ton, more than 1 ton of coal. Mm-hmm. That is just sort of like an illustration for that. Now, with that kind of energy, you have to also control it. But we've had 60 years experience in controlling nuclear power. There are 450 nuclear power plants in the world, 130 in construction, and countries who, for example, like Germany, canceled nuclear is thinking of going back because, number one, because of the Ukraine war, they're dependent on gas that has been cut off by Russia, and then the price of coal is very expensive. Now, people say, we have a lot of solar and wind, so why don't we use that? There is no conflict between renewables and nuclear. In fact, they need each other because solar and wind are 30% available only. So they need 70% of the time a backup. Ngayon, ang pang-backup po kasi ng solar and wind is coal.
It's coal.
Coal, nuclear can fulfill that role. Of course, people also are suggesting batteries, but batteries are hugely expensive. I'll give you an example. I see Germany has developed the best technology for wind and solar, but they're still 50% coal. And they actually want to restart their nuclear power plants that they stopped after Fukushima, but nag-retire na yung mga tao nila. So China has 50 plants, and then they have about almost 20, but it's only for their own use.
Yes, sir.
So, but the big issue here is there's zero emission for nuclear. It has nuclear waste, but nuclear waste can be safely contained. Although that's that's considered as the Achilles heel nga daw sa nilalagay yung waste.
That's controversial. Mr. Arcilla, madali naman sa Germany bumalik sa nuclear because they already have the plants existing. And it's an emergency, because nga of the tight situation sa fuel. all over the world, fossil fuels, and pati nga yung sa mga renewables. So if we are going there, magkano yung mga initial investment, even for the small modular type? Ano yung kakailanganin natin? Because that is an issue being raised, kaya ba natin? It's pretty expensive, no? The initial investment. How much do you think? Yung range na lang, modest investment.
All right, let me explain. Yung first is Germany, ma'am. They cannot just restart because nag-retire na yung mga tao nila. The price for nuclear power, there's a huge difference between the Western ones, like the ones in the US and the UK. They have suffered a lot of delays. That's what makes it very expensive. Umabot ng $10 to $12 billion. But in the past 5 years, there are two countries that have produced nuclear power plants at cost and on time. One is South Korea. They have produced 4 large nuclear power plants in the UAE, an oil-rich country. $5 billion on time and at cost. Okay. China actually has been constructing nuclear power plants. The costs are kind of, but from some scientists that I know, it's under $5 billion. Now, to give you an idea, it may be expensive in the beginning, but nuclear power plants, like in America, they're lasting now 60 years, and they're being licensed for another 20 years. So 80 years yan, as compared to coal plants at 20 years lang. So in the long run, bawing-bawi na po yan. The BNPP that was constructed, similar model in South Korea, they recovered investments in only 6 years. And in fact, if, for example, if South Korea has an offer to restart the BNPP, di ko lang kung magkano, $1 or $2 billion.
Sure, 1 or 2 billion,
no?
yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you run the BNPP, the fuel will cost $30 million that will last for 18 months. And that fuel is small. It will fit inside a jeepney. So 18 months, 1.5 years, wala kang isusubong fuel, no emissions. If that were a coal plant running 620 megawatts for the same 18 months, you will need 50 Panamax ships. A Panamax ship is 50 to 80,000 tons. The importation cost of the coal for the 18 months, 50 Panamax ships will be at least 600 to 800 million US dollars. So doon lang sa fuel, for example, if South Korea wants to get, and then the DOE and the president approves it, the investment will be recovered in 3 years from the fuel savings alone. And you don't have the emissions. So now, for the small modular reactors, the problem with small modular reactors, actually they're very good kasi maliit po siya, but they cannot be built yet in 8 years. I've just been to Vienna. We've done, and then wala pa pong, there's no commercial SMR. Ang isa pa lang nakabuild si Russia, yung kanilang nasa ship, but no one wants to deal with Russia. Only China is building one in Hainan Islands. It's a small modular reactor. But the ones with the good designs, the USA, South Korea has a design. There are almost 80 designs. Nothing will come in the next 8 years, which means
Yes, sir.
if SMRs happen, it will be after the term of President BBM.
So wala pa, sir, modular reactor na commercially produced, in other words?
Wala
not
po.
looking
The
at that
design is
immediate
very
term.
nice. Opo.
Yes, sir.
Actually, ideal yan sa mga islands na isolated. For example, yan po ang mahal ng mga kuryente. I'm from Catanduanes, sobrang mahal ng kuryente. Yan, wala sa grid.
Yes, sir.
Tapos, ang kagandahan po, the one advantage of small modular reactors is that it's been, they miniaturized it, so the whole vessel is built in the factory, and all the inspections and tests are done in the factory. Yung po nakaka-cause and delay in the large nuclear plant constructions. So if you bring that, kakasya sa truck, actually in 70 megawatt, isang malaking truck, kakasya yung buong vessel. So dadali na lang dun sa isla, plug and play. And then if you need more, you have some more, you know. So, and it will only happen, some cost daw nila, pwedeng $1 or $2 billion, but the cost will go down if you start manufacturing more. Parang kotse yan eh.
Yes, sir.
Once you start standardizing them.
Sir?
Now, there's a very important, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Sir, if I may, I'd like to go back to my first question. I understand what you mean that it's going to be a decision by DOE and that PNRI is only the regulator. But I'm sure, I'm really certain that they're consulting you about this. Kasi who else will they consult? Indian po. Indian po, kayo po expert dito eh. So I'm wondering po how far we've gone as far as making that decision, if that decision is coming.
Okay, ganito po kasi ano, when President Duterte signed Executive Order 164, establishing the national position, it created what we call a Nuclear Energy Program Interagency Committee, which will be the whole government approach that will help run the nuclear program. Hindi pa nagmi-meeting po yun eh. I was hoping na ang chair po nun si DOE. I think we will be meeting soon, no? And in fact, this Saturday, I'll be going to Japan with the USEC of the DOE in charge to look at nuclear power plants and also Fukushima. So, para makita po nila.
You're going to Fukushima?
In one of our Senate...
You're going to Fukushima?
Yes. No, it's important. Actually, let me explain why Fukushima is important. Kasi yan ang tinatanong. Mangyayari ba yung Fukushima sa Pilipinas? Di ba? Okay. Actually, Fukushima strengthened the nuclear argument. Why? First, the Fukushima nuclear plant is older than the BNPP. Okay? And when it was constructed, the seismic rating is 0.14 G. Yung sa atin, 0.4. So the BNPP is 3 times stronger than the Fukushima plant. The magnitude 9 earthquake that happened in Japan did not destroy the nuclear plant. That's the most important thing. What happened is that when the earthquake struck, they had to stop the operations of the nuclear plant. But then, mainit pa yung reactor, you have to cool it off with water, circulate it. But then the pumps are located in the basement. When the tsunami came and flooded the basement, there was nothing to cool the plant. That's why they had a meltdown. And then hydrogen accumulated, and it was a hydrogen explosion that caused it. Okay. Now, why will that not happen in the Philippines? Number one, the elevation of BNPP is 18 meters higher than the tsunami. Number two, we have never had a magnitude 9 earthquake. Number three, all the 450 nuclear plants in the world did a root cause analysis. Because we know what happened in Fukushima to make sure that ang tawag po ng LOCA, loss of cooling accident, does not happen. In fact, in Fukushima, there are 8 nuclear plants. May 4 pong nasa higher elevation, walang nangyari. So, to my mind, it is the worst accident that happened, but we know exactly why it happened. And in terms of nuclear energy running, over yung lahat ng total energy and saka yung how many people have died, nuclear has the least amount of deaths. Coal, ang dami nang namatay sa coal, even wind, at saka sa solar wala masyado, no? So yun po. So, and one argument that I have for nuclear, if it is unsafe, America has 92 working nuclear plants operating for 60 years, and they're giving them license for another 20 years. And some of their nuclear plants are beside cities. If it is unsafe, all of you have been to the U.S. You know, you have been using nuclear power if you were there. Maybe you didn't know what it was. And the cost of nuclear power is low. In South Korea, the electricity rate is half that of ours, and their GDP is very high. So that's why when DOE did a survey in 2019, 70% of the Filipinos they serve, 79%. Said nuclear is acceptable kasi sobra pong mahal ang kuryente.
Mr. Arcilla, bakit ang Japan ang taas ng gamit ng nuclear? They have the most expensive power in Asia. And ang US and South Korea, they're not in the Pacific Ring of Fire. Yan yung sinasabi ng mga nag-aalala sa nuclear power.
Yeah. Okay,
Kaya tayo nandun. And in fact, you're saying it's never happened dito yung 9 magnitude 9. Ito naman, mga people sinasabi sa atin, we have to get ready for the big one.
Yeah, diba? Okay.
Paano yun? Kaya yun, nag-aalala din ng mga tao.
Yeah.
How do you address naman those concerns?
Okay, I'm a geologist. I was the head of National Institute of Geological Sciences for 9 years. Okay? So let me address what your concern. Bakit wala tayong magnitude 9 earthquake? Because the strength of the earthquake is proportional to the length of the contiguous faults. In the Philippines, the faults are segmented. So we don't, ang sinasabing big one is probably magnitude 7.8. That is in the West Marikina Valley Fault. Okay? I wrote the paper that named that fault. So some people say it's my fault, in 1987.
It's your fault.
Yeah, it's my fault.
A geologist
Anyway.
joke.
So yun po. Ngayon, ang tanong, kaya bang ma-resist ng nuclear plant natin yung 7.8? Kayang-kaya. In fact, noong 1990, may malaking earthquake na nangyari doon sa Baguio, remember? Actually sa Cabanatuan. Walang nangyari doon sa PNPP. Malapit lang siya doon sa epicenter. There was a volcanic eruption, the next volcano, Pinatubo, wala din nangyari. Now, I know that there's some people na may volcano at saka fault daw. Parehong fake news po yun. PVOX will be the one to prove that. Yung sa Ring of Fire po, Taiwan has 4 nuclear plants. They also have earthquakes. And even America is also in the Ring of Fire. Some parts of America, hindi lahat. Yung eastern side, wala. Sa western side, may parts sila na may subduction zones. Meron ding mga nuclear power plants po doon, no? And then it depends on the engineering design. Definitely, you must not build on top of a fault. Pag may planta po na nasa fault, di pwedeng paandarin yan. Kami po magdi-lisensya, I will not sign that license. So before a nuclear plant is operated, it has to pass severe testing. And there is an international body that helps, the International Atomic Energy Agency. They have best practices. We will be following their guidelines. So, yun po.
But Dr. Arcilla, if I could just continue to poke holes at your argument, no? Because of course we're not just talking about earthquakes. We're very much a disaster-prone country, right? So we also have to think of flooding, landslides. We also have to think of volcanic eruptions, marami, right? And severe typhoons. I mean, we may not have had 9.1 magnitude, but we had the worst typhoon that ever hit land, right? So it's all these things. And I think for me, the underlying question there is if countries as rich and technologically advanced as Japan can still, get hit by a disaster that big, what chance do we stand, right? What happens when there's a disaster, which I feel like, is something we should be prepared for.
Okay, let me answer your question. Japan has 55 nuclear power plants. They have they're similar geologic situations as us. They've had typhoons. But the 54, they're restarting their plants now because their power has become very expensive. Now, not all of the country is a fault or a volcano. In fact, but by the way, there is a town now in Pangasinan that has said, we want a nuclear plant, the town of, I think, Labrador. We want a nuclear plant in our vicinity. So pinadalang kami ng sulat. So anong gagawin namin? The exclusion principles muna. First, is there an active volcano? Pag merong active volcano in the vicinity, rule out yan. How close is it to the active fault? So, and then yung sinasabi niyo po, tsunami, flood, all of those will be evaluated. If they don't pass those physical constraints, the plant will not be built. That's just the way it is. That's why in the Philippines, one of the best ways to build a nuclear plant is Palawan kasi walang earthquakes at saka volcanoes. And they need the power.
Pero sir,
so you mean to say if we do get into nuclear power again, hindi necessarily Bataan kaagad. We're not talking about just restarting Bataan. We're talking about building new nuclear power plants by themselves.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, in the executive order of 164, what it says is that study what can be done for Bataan, okay? And then the new builds. And the new builds will be much safer, and then islands. Now, why Bataan? Bataan kasi has a lot of baggage into it. But technologically, what's ang advantage ng Bataan po ay may country na nag-offer to restart it. And they have an exact model, is South Korea. And the Koreans say that they can restart it in 5 years, which is under the term of BBM. No? Kasi pag nakapag-construct, kasi nandyan na yan eh, $2.3 billion. Kung umandar yan, and you can see people say it's safe, at tapos ang baba yung kuryente, then the others can be built. But it's like this. I mean, we are number 2 in the world in geothermal. If we had more geothermal, why would we even bother with nuclear? Okay, Laos and Cambodia, for example, in Vietnam, they're not considering nuclear now because they're overflowing with hydro. But the Philippines, what is our problem? 60% of our electricity comes from coal, 90% of which is imported from Indonesia. Looking for more oil. I love what they're doing, that perspective, no? And then they're also ramping up renewables, also needed, yeah, no? But the solution to the energy is a mix. It's not nuclear lang, it's not renewables lang. What we want to do is eventually phase out coal. Kasi ang coal imported, polluting pa. Sobrang mahal po.
Sir, if...
Paano naman yung geothermal? You mentioned geothermal eh. Bakit hindi natin i-ramp up yung geothermal development?
Yeah. Actually, ma'am, a very good point. The issue with geothermal is this, is that the big fields have already been discovered. Okay? And in fact, for example, pinakamalaking field nasa Leyte, sa Bicol, Macban. Yung mga volcanoes na candidate, maliliit na lang. So the discoveries will be maybe 100, 200 megawatts. We need about 10,000 megawatts, 10 to 12,000 megawatts, no? So even if you produce, for example, sa may mga nagsasabing renewables, na may mga 3,000 megawatts, malaki pa rin yung, there's going to be a very big gap. So, and in fact, maybe next year we'll start building the crunch on that, no? So renewables are important. And then even the oil search are important because we have to do a mix. But nuclear, the advantage of nuclear, for example, is that the price of uranium has been stable and uranium is easier to source than coal.
Sir,
And of course,
yes, sir.
Paano yung waste disposal ng nuclear plant, which is also a big problem. Kasi hindi siya ma-cycle,
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for asking that question. Kasi that has been the Achilles heel of the nuclear industry in other places. The problem is they delayed the disposal of the nuclear waste, parang for future generations. But the technology is already there. And if ever itutuloy natin yung nuclear program, I would recommend, if I'm asked by the president, to put the waste disposal at the beginning, meaning gawin na yung plano. And then my suggestion is this: deep borehole disposal with engineered barriers. Okay, why? We already have the deep borehole technology. Our geothermal wells already reach up to 3 kilometers deep. So if I were to put dispose of the nuclear waste, get an isolated island, drill very deep boreholes, plug it with bentonite, and it's as if the waste didn't exist. You have to isolate the waste for 10,000 years. From human activity. Kaya talagang the only way is deep geologic disposal and borehole. Hindi pwedeng sa tabi-tabi lang ilagay.
Di ba? Papayag ba mga tao? That's another problem. You said that going nuclear is a political decision. Pero accepting all these plants, all these facilities, it's also a political problem. O paano? Ang dito, natin may backyard. Hindi ba malaking problema yun? Are you seeing that as a big problem?
May nag-volunteer na nga, ma'am, na site eh. At saka yung sa islands na yan, isa pa, hindi lang, may mga susunod pa. Yung sa disposal site na yan, actually, kung ako lang negosyante, I will actually buy an island and then have demonstration wells. And then, for every nuclear waste that you put, you charge money. Kasi the technology is, I believe in the technology. Sabi ko, I'm willing to live in that island. Because I know that it cannot, it will not happen. I've been doing this, by the way, that's my research, is nuclear waste disposal. That's my expertise in nuclear. I'm not a nuclear engineer, pero kung saan itatapon, yan po yung pinag-aaralan ko.
Pero sir, if nuclear energy is so attractive, earlier in the show you were saying na mga 10% lang of the world's power mix is nuclear. Why so low? I understand you need to have a mix, pero why isn't it higher than 10%?
Actually, a big part of is the negative perception of nuclear. When you say nuclear, kasi if you look at Hollywood, ang unang nasa isipan nila ay bomb. Just look at Netflix. Meron ka dyan ng Chernobyl. All the movies, the bad guys. We cannot compete against Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible, mga plutonium nila, di ba? It's not, they're all exaggerated. But they want to ramp it up now. In fact, the IPCC has said, if you don't go nuclear, you will never reach the 1.5 degree target. People want, mag-gas na lang tayo. Meron pa din yung emissions, So unless you really want to totally cut off your energy usage. So, and then again, as I said, renewables come hand in hand. It's a mix that has to be done. And they should not pit nuclear versus renewables, etc. They help each other. Kasi yung isa, 92% available, yung isa 30% available. Okay? So yun po yung... Kasi those who promise sometimes, yan nga, yung energy. Isang problema po talaga dito, ganito rin, Look at who owns the power plants. But hindi po bumababa ang kuryente natin. It's in the hands of very few, very rich people. Okay? Yun po, isang issue.
Hindi ba magiging ganyan din yung nuclear plant?
Ano, ma'am?
Ang nuclear plant, sino may-ari? Government?
Yan ang dapat ayusin ng government. Sabi nga ng mga tawag nito ng mga electrical cooperatives, lalo kung SMRs, they should participate in the ownership. Because the electricity is expensive in the electric. Kasi ang napupunta lahat ng pera doon sa nagge-generate lang ng power. Mga mga konting power oligarchs po yan. Sorry for the term, but that's what it is,
Okay. Dr. Carlo Arcilla, Director of the Philippine Nuclear Research Institute. Sir, always a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much,
Sir. We are starting up another conversation after this breather, so please do stay with us.
officials have expressed confidence that the Philippine economy will be able to achieve its growth targets despite the threat of high inflation.
We are on the first stage before the economic recovery, and we are marching on the right direction.
Yeah, having been deprived of mobility for 2 years, you just want to go out and see the world again. I think that mobility was a big part of the story there. The high prices might not have completely dampened the desire to go out and spend. Perhaps because on the employment side, they see opportunities for income generations.
The Bangko Sentral sees prices in November jumping by as much as 8.2%. Is this the peak, or will inflation further accelerate next year? Let's ask Economist Calixto Chikiamco. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi rin. Thank you for having me.
Well, sir, thank you for joining us. We're with Dana Pamintuan of the Philippine Star and, of course, Regina Lay, our business editor.
Good evening po.
Good evening.
Sir, of course, we do want to talk about inflation, but if you don't mind, I'll squeeze in another topic muna. Kasi this is also a hot topic. Yung Sovereign Wealth Fund, ang Maharlika Sovereign Wealth Fund that they've been talking about, 275 billion already being committed, kahit hindi pa umaandar yung panukala sa Kongreso, may commitments na. I also understand that you have a lot of countries doing this, 70 countries, I think, all in all, have sovereign wealth funds. Pero is this the right time for us to be doing this, and can we afford it, considering that from what I've read, the countries that do this, they should have extra cash lying around, and that they shouldn't have they shouldn't be burdened with international debt?
Well, you said it. You said, is it the right time? I think it's a good idea at the right time. But it's not the right time now, for two reasons. One is the right time is when you have a lot of surplus, fiscal surplus. But as you know, because of the pandemic, our government now is in a very tight fiscal position. Our debt to GDP is about 60%. So you usually set up a sovereign wealth fund when you have excess cash, when you have some kind of bonanza from excess earnings from either commodity exports or false strikes, etc. But we don't have. So now is not the right time. And even for the state pension funds or the pension funds like SSS, first of all, these are private funds. They don't have. They have a different risk profile. And at the same time, I think because of the increases in the pension benefits during the Duterte administration, the actuarial life of SSS, in fact, has been shortened. So on the financial side, I think it's not the right time. Secondly, there is a danger of corruption, of politicization of the investments, etc. Of course, they say there will be good governance, there will be independent directors, but you can only do that when you have a rule of law. Managers and board of directors, if they think they can get away with it, the danger is that they will do it. They will do some kind of malfeasance if we don't have a rule of law. And as I pointed out to somebody, is that we don't really have a rule of law. Even those persons who have been convicted are living a high life in Bilibid. So what kind of rule of law do we have? I think the right time to set up a sovereign wealth fund is when we have a rule of law.
Kailan pa yun? Kailan pa yun?
So will we ever get there, sir? Sir, I think Malaysia comes to mind. I mean,
I was just going to point out one MDB nga as the
case,
cautionary tale, no?
In 2009, he set up the One Malaysian Berhad development and
one MDB.
Yeah, and now he's in jail.
But at least the president, right? I forgot his name. He's now in jail.
Oo nga, kinulong. And the wife.
It's a long time, but he's in jail. But here in the Philippines, you don't see people in jail.
Well, actually, sir, that's only one half of it. Kasi meron pang annual, may annual contributions pa according to the bill. I don't know how they interpret it. Kasi there's equivalent of 10% of overseas workers remittances as provided by the BSP, and another 10% equivalent of BPO contributions. I don't know how they computed the contributions and why they're contributing, and 10% from PAGCOR, and that's on an annual basis. So
I don't know how they can do that with OFW earnings. I mean, that would be confiscatory if that's the case, And right now, I don't think even the reserves should be used for that purpose, because right now, I think it's being used to stabilize the peso movements. So we are not in a fiscal position to be able to fund the sovereign wealth fund at this time.
Sir, did this idea come as a surprise to you? Parang biglaan lang yung when they filed the bill, it came as a bit of a surprise to us. I wonder if some of you guys in the business community were consulted about it.
No, it also came as a surprise to me. It was out of the blue. Even the Ben Jokla never mentioned that in any of the plans of the administration.
Ang problema nga ngayon ay considering the sponsors, it might actually be passed. It's emanating from allies of the it's
relatives
a
and allies.
Super Congress yan eh. Yun ang inaalala ngayon ng mga tao that it will actually be approved. Anong magiging impact nun in our economic planning, in our development priorities there?
Well, again, it will be hard to say. We don't know the final shape of what the sovereign wealth fund would look like. But certainly, I think it would make people more cautious and worry about this fund.
But sir, does it surprise you that apparently Secretary Jokno does not disapprove of it kasi he was quoted as saying na there appears to be money kasi nag-commit na yung mga GFIs. Although I don't know if that's equivalent to his approval, pero he didn't appear to have voiced any concern.
Yeah, well, I think that's surprising to me because I think he knows more than anybody else the government's fiscal position. Again, as I said, you say, where will they get the money from? Social Security is a private fund. Those are funds of employees, no? And there are actuarial commitments. So I don't know if legally they can do that.
Pwede na bang mag-ano?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yes, sir. Okay, sir. Let's move on to another topic. Talk about inflation.
Yung binanggit mo, introduction mo, inflation eh.
Sorry, sir. Sumegway ako bigla.
Sige, tuloy mo na. Tuloy mo na.
Well, sir,
Ikaw na mag-segue.
sige, sir. Reg, anyway, sige. Sir, anyway, BSP think tank says that they're looking at possibly up to 8.2% inflation by end of November. Are you looking at the same numbers? And what about December?
Yeah, well, again, that's not surprising because, of course, demand has gone up because of it's Christmas season. And of course, various factors like fish prices probably going up because now the close season. So and of course the effect of transport fare increases, have been felt in November. However, I think moving forward we will see a deceleration, especially in 2023. Inflation is about the rate of increase. I don't think you can say it's continually increasing. Oil prices have in fact gone down to about $80 a barrel, no? But I think that's the lowest since February. And global economy is slowing down, so we can expect commodity prices to still go down. And China, of course, as you know, because of their zero COVID policy, is also slowing down. From the expected 5%, that we grow only about maybe 3%. So global demand will probably weaken, and therefore with it, prices of oil and other commodities will weaken. Of course, there is one caveat, with respect to next year. It is the question of minimum wages, because labor is asking what, 35,000 or something as minimum wage, So the question is, will the government, play populist or not? Because again, that will have a huge effect on inflation if minimum wages are unduly increased.
Should they play the populist card? I mean, it's a very delicate balance at this point, because if you let inflation get out of hand, then of course we're talking about millions and millions of families that will struggle to afford basic commodities, right? And you're right, sir, that a lot of global factors are easing, pero what we also have are typhoons, right? Agricultural damage. So we have to factor that in moving forward. So again, so the question is, should they play the populist card? Should they keep doing that?
No, of course not. In fact, what they can do, and in fact, we have recommended this as part of the Foundation for Economic Freedom, is to extend EO 171, which is to let the low tariff rates on chicken, corn, rice, and coal to be extended for another year. So that will help tamper down any inflationary effects, no?
Ano pa? Any other measures to temper inflation? Because people are, well, everyone's saying we haven't seen the worst yet. And people are worried it will affect consumption, which is driving our economy. So even the OFW, sabi nila, the stronger dollar, nanenegate ng effect ng higher prices here. What else can be done to tame inflation?
Well, we really have to be more about in terms of liberalizing food imports. I mean, we have to face the fact that there's shortages, no? We don't have enough local capacity. And therefore, I would even reduce tariff rates further on certain food imports, no? Rather than even for sugar. As you know, sugar is still quite high, despite, I think, the approved importation of about 150,000 metric tons. It's still about 100 pesos per kilo. So I think they should liberalize it, remove all those quantitative restrictions, and let the market determine what will be, the good price. So that's what I would do in the short term. In the long term, we really have to increase production capacity, especially on food, because food accounts for about 50% of our inflation rate. So we really have to increase our production capabilities. And we can only do that if we promote commercial agriculture. We have to apply science, technology, and management into increasing our farm outputs. Because right now, the problem is that our farmlands are highly fragmented. The average land size is 1 hectare or less. So you can't have economies of scale, you cannot apply scientific know-how, etc. So we need to change the structure of our agriculture. Do you know that the average age of farmers now is about 55 years old? Their average education is grade 5. So how do you expect increased productivity? You can only get so much. Giving subsidies is not the cure. It's only a temporary relief. The cure is increased productivity, and you can only do that by applying capital science and management, which is commercial farming. But in order to do that, we have to amend CARP, because CARP says that the maximum you can own is 5 hectares. So effectively, you're telling successful farmers, don't expand. You cannot expand. So that's the only way. We have to change the structure of our agriculture to a modern one.
Yes, sir. So, sir,
I think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think these are all things that the president knows. I mean, he's gone around the world talking about food security, right? Giving speeches about food security, increasing production, et cetera, et cetera. My question to you is, are you guys seeing enough action on that front? Enough progress?
Well, right now, we don't see it in the legislative program. I think that Congress, for example, should pass a livestock development bill, essentially really reducing the tariffs for corn, which is an input to chicken and pork prices. You know, our corn prices are almost double that of Thailand. You know, so, and therefore, our pork prices are high, our chicken prices are high. You know, so that's really one of the things that have to be done. No, unfortunately, I think right now the situation calls for tough choices. And the administration must be willing to make a tough choice if it wants to slay the problem of inflation and generate increased investments.
Yes, sir. But sir, how do you strike that balance between? I get your point. Agricultural production, developing, improving productivity. But how do you strike that balance between developing agriculture in increasing productivity and, at the same time, in the short term, dampening inflation by easing the regulations on importation? I know they don't have to be exclusive. I mean, you don't have to make exclusive choices. But at the same time, as well, you also, I suppose, have to strike a balance. Na in importing, you're also not weakening further the agriculture sector. But I suppose it's a touchy thing.
Importation will not weaken the agriculture sector. It will weed out the inefficient ones. And the ones that will survive, that will thrive, will be those who are more productive. Because that's what we want to do. We want to force agriculture to become more efficient, to be at par with our neighbors. But that can't happen if we continue protecting them. If we continue with this protectionism, you know, we have adopted the policy of protectionism for the past, 50 years? So what has it gotten us? You know, we are now more dependent on food imports. Same thing, all this land reform and this fragmentation of land, has it increased productivity? It has not. So it's about time for us to learn our lessons, you know, and change the strategy.
Okay. Okay, sir. Sir, always a pleasure to have you on board. We hope to have you again very soon. Economist Calixto Chikiamco. Sir, maraming salamat for all your insights, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And that's it for the Chiefs. We hope to discuss here. We'll keep the conversation going. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Regina Lay from One News.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.